Philadelphia Eagles training camp is just one day away. So coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to predict the Eagles 2025 53-man roster.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Football season is among us. The Philadelphia Eagles begin training camp in less than 24 hours. They hit the practice field tomorrow afternoon at the NovaCare Complex. Last Friday was the ring ceremony, really putting a ribbon, a bow, tying it up. The 2024 season officially concluded, I think, with that ring ceremony, although they'll also celebrate the first game back against the Dallas Cowboys before the game. But that ring ceremony, to me, with training camp starting tomorrow, really ends that chapter in Eagles history, and it's time to now go for a repeat in 2025. Again, the Eagles hit the practice field tomorrow afternoon. We'll have a recap of that practice and any interviews that are done as well after tomorrow's activities at NovaCare. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. On today's edition of the show, I'm going to do a pre-training camp 53-man roster prediction going through the offensive and defensive side of the football. Let's see how many players the Eagles are going to keep at each position. This is predictive what I think the Eagles will end up doing, not what I think they should do. So let's get into that now, coming up right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Let's start with the offensive side of the football, where I think there are, and I've probably said it on the show before, but I do feel like on offense, and most people would agree with this, there are fewer questions, both short-term and long-term on offense, from top to bottom, than defense from top to bottom. Offense is an older unit. Its players smack dab in the middle of their prime, on top 10 contracts. Even the depth of this team on offense, I think we have a better understanding for who's going to fit in where. Whereas on defense, I do think there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more projection going on for the starting lineup, but also who the role players will be and who the depth pieces are as well. And also just like when it comes to how many of each position they're going to keep. I also think I was torn more on defense putting together this 53 than on offense. On offense, I feel like I have a really good understanding, at least, again, pre-training camp, of what the Eagles are thinking on paper. At quarterback, I think it's obvious who the top three guys are. It's Jalen Hurts, it's Tanner McKee, and it's rookie Kyle McCord, the day 3 pick out of Syracuse. I know that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is on this roster. I really do like the idea of having somebody like him, like DTR, on the 53 that has that mobility that if Jalen Hurts were to get injured long-term, they could have a package where there's a mobile quarterback on the field. But I think, and it was obvious, it sounds like in OTAs, and I think it'll be obvious as well during the preseason and during training camp, that McCord is just on another level as a advanced passer than DTR. And I think McCord does have mobility as well, that he's going to be, and the Eagles, Howie Roseman loves to keep draft picks, unless it's a Clayton Thorson kind of player that literally plays his way off the 53. He likes to keep those players. So I think McCord, with all that being said, is just going to end up being a better player, too, than DTR. And I think it's going to show. I think he'll be the third quarterback. Maybe your new Nate Sudfeld to the Nick Foles of Tanner McKee, and then you have your franchise quarterback in Jalen Hurts. I think Tanner McKee, I said on the show last week, I think he's ready to be one of the best backup quarterbacks in football. That's how excited about McKee I am. And I think last year showed that he's taking more and more strides as the years go on. So those are the three. I think DTR is likely on the practice squad or he's picked up by another team. You have 3 quarterbacks on the roster: Jalen Hurts, Tanner McKee, and Kyle McCord. At running back, you're going to keep 3 as well. And I think this one is pretty obvious too. It's Saquon Barkley. It's Will Shipley, who I think will lead the team behind Saquon at running back in snaps and overall touches in the rushing and receiving game. But I do think that A.J. Dillon is going to be that third running back, because if Saquon Barkley does get hurt at any point this year, or they do want to use him less in the run game early on in the season to keep him healthy, I think they'll want a bigger, more physical back that can take more of a beating than Will Shipley to help kind of take the load off of Saquon. So I think A.J. Dillon, it sounds like the neck injury is in the past, that he's healthy right now, fully healthy. This is a former second-round pick with some legit juice, some really good pass production. I don't think he's going to be this year's version of Rashad Penny. I could see it happening, and maybe a Montrell Johnson, one of these UDFA running backs. I like Johnson a lot coming out of Florida. If they kept 4 running backs, he'd be my choice. Maybe he does outplay Dillon and he's kept. But I think A.J. Dillon right now is a style of player the Eagles want on this 53, and if he's healthy, I think he's going to be that 2A, 2B with Will Shipley. So 3 quarterbacks, 3 running backs. I think that's pretty much chalk. And at wide receiver, I don't think I have anything shocking either. I really wanted to get Danny Gray onto this 6-man group, but I just couldn't get there. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, they are your top 3 receivers. No debate there. I am a big fan of Johnny Wilson. I know last year he had some drop issues, including that drop in the Super Bowl in the first half. Has to separate better, but the 6'7" frame, I think he was already an elite blocking receiver as a rookie. Maybe you use him more as an inline tight end style of player this year. Maybe he has a different role. In year 2, I want to bank on him developing. And again, he has a few unique elite traits that I think are worth keeping on this team, even though he doesn't play special teams, and that kind of puts him behind the 8 ball compared to some of these other guys that are gunners and returners. I think Johnny Wilson has some interesting versatility as a receiver tight end hybrid, as a really good red zone weapon potentially. He's just got to hit the jugs machine because he's also a really good blocker, and for the most run-heavy team in football, that goes a long way in keeping you on the 53, especially if you're not going to be a special teams player as a receiver. You better be a damn good blocker, and that's Johnny Wilson. And again, 6'7", like, I just want to give him another chance to see if he can become more, because if he does, maybe he can even start rotating in more with Dotson, again, in like certain situations like the red zone where you want a bigger frame out there. Maybe no tight end behind Dallas Goedert really produces, and you know Johnny Wilson can block. Maybe if he puts on more pounds this year, more LBs, maybe you give Wilson a shot at tight end. He's just too interesting of a player for me to give up year 1, even with the drop issues. And then rounding out my top 6, the bottom 2, Terrace Marshall Jr., and then Avery Williams. Avery Williams, I think, is going to be one of your top kick returners. I think if you want to spell Cooper DeJean this year as a punt returner, Britton Covey's gone. Maybe you want Avery Williams to give it a chance as a punt returner. He has that returner, versatility. Also, he's a player that's played both receiver and running back, so he has some offensive versatility as well. He's an interesting player that I think is going to be on this 53, and I like Terrace Marshall Jr. right now over Danny Gray, although I like Danny Gray's downfield speed. Terrace Marshall Jr. is a former day 2 pick. He's got size. I think he's going to be the best overall talent of those bottom 3 players. Ainias Smith not making the team here, as you probably noticed. And Jalen Hurts mentioned him by name in the spring as somebody that was making plays for the Eagles in OTAs. So I think Marshall Jr. gets that spot over Ainias Smith and over Danny Gray. The Eagles keep 6 wide receivers, and I think they keep 3 tight ends. I think they go with Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra. No surprise there with those top 2. I do think right now that Harrison Bryant is the favorite to be that 3rd tight end over Kylan Granson. Although Granson's interesting, maybe in some packages is a better run after the catch option, more of a gadget player, a half-pack kind of option. I do think Harrison Bryant is the more complete tight end, a bigger player, bigger catch radius, a better blocker. I think Bryant's come a long way since he came into the NFL with the Raiders, and I think right now it's close between him, E.J. Jenkins, and Granson as well, but I think Bryant right now is my favorite to be that 3rd tight end. And then the offensive line was a tough call. There were a couple tough cuts for me, including UDFA out of Utah, Holland Pierce, who's 6'8", over 330 pounds. The Eagles are trying him out right now as a guard, maybe this year's version of Mekhi Becton. I had to cut him, though, because the Eagles have a lot of interesting options on the offensive line. I kept 10 players. So, of course, your starting 5, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, the starting right guard, and then Lane Johnson. I made sure to keep Drew Kendall because I think he is one of the more versatile players on your bench as a center guard hybrid. Kendall Lamb, one of your primary backup tackles, if not the guy. And then Miles Hinton and Cameron Williams, 2 of your day 3 selections. out of Michigan and Texas. And then, sorry, it says Matt Pryor here for our YouTube viewers, but I did also keep Kenyon Green instead of Matt Pryor. I think Kenyon Green will do enough in training camp to be worth keeping on this roster as a former top 15 pick. And then, Matt Pryor, I think, was another surprise cut because he does have starting experience. The Eagles did draft him. But overall, I think the Eagles are going to want to give Stoutland a lot of options with young upside players to develop behind that starting five. So 10 players on the offensive line kept overall. Also, didn't put them in the graphic, fullback Ben Van Sumeren. So the Eagles keep 26 players overall on the offensive side of the football. Defense is where it got a little trickier. We'll get into it coming up next as we continue to predict the Eagles 2025 53-man roster right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track all my favorite matchups this summer, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. Plus, the NFL season's coming up. Let's get some futures rolling here. Maybe you want Jalen Hurts to win MVP. You can do that on FanDuel as well. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it all feel like you're part of the action. New to FanDuel, well, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. And guys, today's show is also sponsored by Betterhelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with each and every workday. Of course, most of us can't just quit our jobs or, take endless vacations. Even me, I travel all the time to get away. Not possible, though, 24/7. What we can do is start small, whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges. That's where BetterHelp comes in. They have the flexibility of online therapy, making it easy to fit them into a busy Monday through Friday schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners are going to get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/lockdown. That's BetterHelp.com/lockdown for 10% off your first month of online therapy. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. On today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we are predicting the Eagles' 53-man roster for the 2025 season. I kept 26 players overall on the offensive side of the football. So knowing that they're going to keep 3 special teamers, you have 24 players to work with on defense. And I do think there were some tougher calls on the defensive side of the football. One that I didn't really have issues with, though, the edge rusher position. I think this was chalk. 5 players that I want on this team, although Patrick Johnson was a tough cut because he does have some really good special teams ability. I wanted to make sure I kept one of the Eagles draft picks at the bottom of this roster in Antoine Powell-Ryland. I think he could be a good pass rushing specialist in 2025. So for me, again, Powell-Ryland rounds out the bottom 5 of this list, but I do have Nolan Smith at the top, Jalix Hunt. Those are your top 2 in the rotation. Azeez Ojulari and Joshua Uche are your 3 and 4. And then I do have Antoine Powell-Ryland as that 5th guy. Again, Patrick Johnson does play special teams. The Eagles have brought him back from when he was with the Giants in 2024, a former draft pick that always had a big role for the Eagles on special teams. But again, because of the unknown of Joshua Uche, because of the 1-year contracts of Uche and Azeez Ojulari, I would like to have another player that's in Philadelphia at this position for more than just a year. And Powell-Ryland, while he is undersized, and I don't know if he'll ever become, a true every down player on the defensive line, the guy had 16 sacks last year. He has a legit spin move, really good speed and bend off the edge. I want to see that through and keep him on this roster over Patrick Johnson, so he's my 5th guy. And Powell-Ryland has speed. I think he could absolutely develop into a special teamer. I had kept 10 linemen overall, 5 edge rushers and 5 defensive tackles, kept 10 offensive linemen, so I thought that worked out perfectly. My 5 defensive tackles, Jalen Carter, Moro Ijoma, Jordan Davis, Ty Robinson, the 4th-round rookie out of Nebraska, and then Thomas Booker makes the team again as that bottom defensive tackle. Again, like the edge rusher position, I don't think anything really surprising here. The top 3 in this rotation are going to be Jalen Carter, Moro Ijoma, and Jordan Davis. The question really, again, is all about Jordan Davis and what kind of role is he going to have? Is he going to have a more prominent role in replacing Milton Williams, or is he not going to take that step as a pass rusher, as a well-conditioned player? And Ijoma's going to have to carry the load. Ty Robinson's going to have a bigger role for a day 3 rookie than you would hope when you have a former first-round pick you traded up for. That's really the big question at defensive tackle. But those are going to be your 4 guys. I think Ijoma and Robinson will rotate more than Davis in those obvious pass rushing situations. But again, hopefully Davis does take that step, as the Eagles did pick up his 5th-year option, and he's trying to get an extension in Philadelphia for the long term. Thomas Booker, I like Booker. I think if he's your 5th defensive tackle, that's a good situation to be in. He was really good last summer and earned a job. He was one of the best players the Eagles had in the preseason. So he's your 5th guy at defensive tackle. And I like that defensive line group. It's really young at edge and tackle. Who's the longest tenured player? It's Jordan Davis. Or no, it's not. I guess. I mean, at least in Philadelphia. And then, of course, you have Uche, who was a 2022 draft pick, or 2020, excuse me. So he's the oldest one. But in Philadelphia, Davis has been here the longest, and then Ojulari drafted around the same time. So it's a really, really young core up front. But Vic Fangio got the most out of the youngest defense in football last year. So I don't mind this strategy at all from Howie Roseman. And then at linebacker, only keeping 4 to start the year, because I think Nakobe Dean, I'm projecting he will start on the PUP list. I have Zach Bond and, of course, Jihad Campbell as your top 2. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. rounds out your top 3. And then day 3 rookie out of Georgia, Smile Mondin, is your 4th guy. And then, of course, eventually Nakobe Dean will be back. I think they'll carry 5 inside linebackers when he's back from the PUP list. He'll be out for a month, though. I project to start 2025. When they do that, they'll have to cut somebody. For me, who was like the last guy in this list, it might be like, maybe it's Kenyon Green, maybe it's Harrison Bryant, maybe you don't keep 3 tight ends, or you chop one of those receivers and you keep 5. Maybe it's Avery Williams or Terrace Marshall Jr. When Dean comes back, they'll carry 5, because I don't think any of these guys are at risk of getting cut. Not even Smile Mondin. Like, he has legit traits that I think the Eagles want to develop. Like, his range, speed, coverage ability is really interesting for a day 3 pick. At cornerback, I kept 6, and man, this is a young group. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Keely Ringo are your top 3 starters. Adoree Jackson is your primary boundary backup. Eli Ricks, I'm actually interested in Eli Ricks still. I haven't given up on Ricks. A lot of people forgot about him because he had a bigger role in 2023 than he did in 2024. He played a lot in 23. He even played some slot. We all remember that big play he had against the Dolphins on Sunday Night Football against Tyreek Hill. This is explosive, rangy, lengthy corner that the Eagles liked him enough last year to, even though he kind of lost out, and, Ringo was ahead of him in the rotation, in the depth chart, I should say, and Isaiah Rodgers was as well. Even as the 6th guy, Ricks was kept on the roster, and I think the Eagles still believe in his ceiling and his upside, and I think he ended up being better than Adoree Jackson this year. I wouldn't be surprised if Ricks is actually one of your top backups on the outside. I think he's definitely worth still keeping on this roster, and he's making very little money. I think he's good depth. And then Avonte Maddox gone. Cooper DeJean, your starting slot corner. They need another backup on the inside. I think day 3 selection, Mac McWilliams, is an interesting player to keep on this team. I think he could be your Avonte Maddox replacement. You got to have a backup that can play in the slot. And again, Eli Ricks did play slot corner for the Eagles at times in 2023. You do have Drew Makuba as well at safety, who did sign today, by the way. The Eagles have their entire 2025 rookie class now signed to 4 to 5 year deals. So you do have some safeties that can play, in the slot. Quinyon Mitchell can play in the slot. Eli Ricks can, but they don't have like a slot corner, a guy that's sole focus behind Cooper DeJean is to be a slot cornerback. And I think Mac McWilliams can be that player. So I had the Eagles keeping their entire rookie class. Nobody got cut. All 3 offensive linemen from day 3 made it. Smile Mondin made it at linebacker. Mac McWilliams made it at corner. I like this Eagles draft class, and I, again, think that and Kyle McCord made it at quarterback. I think Howie Roseman normally gives the benefit of the doubt to the draft picks. Ty goes to the draft pick, and I think these guys are going to make the team, at least as of right now before training camp. Safety, I went a little bit lighter. I went Reed Blankenship, Drew Makuba, Sidney Brown, and Tristan McCullum, who Vic Fangio did mention by name as somebody to not forget in this starting safety battle that we all think and we know it's between Sidney Brown and Drew Makuba. But Fangio said it's McCullum too, and I think he likes McCullum a lot. So he's your 4th and final safety. The Eagles keep 10 defensive backs total. That's your 50 players on offense and defense. And then, of course, you have your 3 special teamers, Jake Elliott as your kicker, Braden Mann as your punter, and Charlie Hewlett as your new long snapper. After almost a decade, Ricky Lovato is no longer in Philadelphia. I would love to know. I know there's like actual evaluations of long snappers, but like, why do they decide now, oh, Rick Lovato just doesn't have it anymore? Like, what stats are the Eagles looking at? Are they reviewing film of long snappers? I would love to know, like, why now is the time? Did Lovato say, pay me, I want a new contract? I got 2 rings in Philadelphia. Not sure, but shout out to a legend, Rick Lovato. Long-term long snapper for the Eagles, but this year it's Charlie Hewlett that's going to be getting the ball to Mann and Elliott. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, my 53-man roster before training camp is set. That's what I would have the Eagles team looking like on paper heading into camp. Who were like the fringe roster bubble players that just missed it from at least my predictions? I'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Rugiet. Rugiet is the new and latest in the game. You've probably heard of Viagra and Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something new beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and it kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can go online. It's completely discreet with board-certified doctors and ships your treatment, like I said, discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use our code LockedOnNFL in all capital letters. You're going to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com, RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL, and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, so Eagles training camp kicks off tomorrow afternoon. Cannot wait. It's going to be at the NovaCare Complex. We'll have a practice recap right here on Locked On Eagles after the practice. We also have our Locked On Squad podcast live on YouTube at noon. That'll also be recorded and posted to our audio feed after as well, so you can find that wherever you get the show in audio form as well. Predicting the 53-man roster on today's LOE. And again, I went heavier on offense, surprisingly, than defense. I kept 26 offensive players, 24 defensive players, and then I went with, of course, our 3 special teamers, making up the 53. Who just missed? Like, who are some of the guys that I really wanted in, but there was somebody else at another position that I wanted, so I went lighter at a position, or he lost out in a roster battle? For me, there were, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 5 guys that I really wanted on this team, but I just couldn't find a way to pencil them in. And, of course, this is with Nakobe Dean on the PUP list, so there's another guy on this 53 that I predicted that probably won't be on the team throughout the majority of the season. The guys that on offense I just had missing were Danny Gray and Anais Smith at wide receiver, Holland Pierce on the offensive line, and then Kylan Granson at tight end. Danny Gray had a good spring. He has, again, not a lot of elite traits, but something that I loved in Danny Gray's game coming out of SMU was his downfield speed and his ability to track the deep ball. If the Eagles want to continue to get the deep ball going as one of the main staples of this offense, and I think this year compared to last year, they're going to take more shots and get back to being a more vertical offense like they were in 2022 and 2023. I think they're going to be more aggressive in the passing game this year. Danny Gray would be an interesting player to have on this roster, maybe over Terrace Marshall or Anais Smith or an Avery Williams. Like, he has legit speed, and I think you're going to see that in the preseason, in training camp. I think, of course, he still needs to work on his route running and his hands, but he has that speed. Maybe you could use him as a returner over Avery Williams. I just thought Terrace Marshall Jr. right now overall is the more complete player. And if, Brown or Smith get injured, I think they need somebody like Terrace Marshall Jr. to play on the outside over a Danny Gray. So that's kind of why I put Marshall Jr. in there. And Jalen Hurts mentioned Marshall by name. Like, that goes a long way to me. That's very notable. And so he's the guy that I have. And Avery Williams has receiver, running back versatility. I think he can return kicks and punts. So Williams, I think, is kind of entrenched in that 6th spot. So Gray was kind of a hard cut. And then Anais Smith, again, the Eagles picked him early in day 3 2 years ago out of Texas A&M. Thought he got better as the year went on. He had a disastrous training camp in preseason. He looked awful. But then I thought he actually made some plays, like that last game against the Giants. He turned some heads. The Eagles, again, like I said, they normally like to keep their young draft picks, but Johnny Wilson, I think, gets ahead of Smith because of the size and the blocking ability. Terrace Marshall Jr., I think, is just a more complete player. And if they have injuries again, I don't think they can rely on Anais Smith. And then Avery Williams is a more versatile returner. So that's why I had Anais Smith missing. And then Kylan Granson made some interesting explosive plays with the Colts over the last few years, but I think the Eagles are going to prefer that size and that more complete skill set of Harrison Bryant than the gadgety halfback kind of style of Kylan Granson. And so he was the 4th tight end. Maybe he makes the practice squad. Maybe he does beat out Bryant. But right now, I think Bryant is 3A. Granson would be 3B. And then E.J. Jenkins has the longest way to go to grab that 3rd spot at tight end. And then Holland Pierce. This was a tough cut. I cut him and Matt Pryor on the offensive line. Ended up keeping Kenyon Green. At the last second, I was like, man, maybe Green just doesn't make the roster at all. And he was a throwaway in that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson trade. And Matt Pryor has the starting experience. But Green, again, was a top 15 pick. Like, I think with Jeff Stoutland, maybe he doesn't become the next Mekhi Becton, but I think Stoutland can at least get Green to be a really solid backup. Again, he has top 15 ability. That's not nothing. So that's why I kept him over Pryor and over Holland Pierce. But I really am intrigued by Holland Pierce. He's 6'8" and over 330 pounds. And Stoutland purposefully moved him from tackle to guard. When he was at, I said Utah earlier, he played at Rutgers. When he was at Rutgers, he was a left tackle. And he was an all Big Ten tackle. Like, he was a good player. But I think he purposely moved him to guard because he really liked the mauling giant type of guard next to a smaller center in Cam Jurgens and next to Lane Johnson. I think Jeff Stoutland really liked what Mekhi Becton became at guard last year, and he's intrigued that maybe Pierce can be that guy in the run game. Like, he is a massive human being that, for his height, moves pretty well downfield. So I think Holland Pierce is a guy that I would love to find a way to keep on the practice squad or to keep on this 53. I didn't end up penciling him in now, but of all these guys on this list, and on defense, like Patrick Johnson was a tough cut for me as well. Holland Pierce, though, of all these players I just said, he was the one that I really wanted to keep on the 53. I just couldn't find a way because, again, Kendall Lamb, you want him as your primary tackle backup. Miles Hinton and Cameron Williams, I think, have more upside than Hinton, or I should say than Pierce. And then, again, Kenyon Green, a former top 15 pick. Like, I think the Eagles are going to keep that on the roster for a little bit. So it was just tough to find a spot for Pierce, and I don't think they're going to keep 11 offensive linemen. Maybe if they didn't have a fullback this year, but Ben Van Sumeren is going to be on this team, and I think he's going to play even more than he did in 2024. All right, that's my 53-man roster predictions before training camp. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on X at LockdownBirds or at DiBiase LOE. Eagles football officially starts tomorrow, kicking off the 2025 season at the NovaCare Complex. We got 4 more shows for you right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast this week, plus 2 live squad shows. So we actually still have 6 episodes dropping into your feed. So subscribe to the show wherever you get the podcast, and make sure you hit us up on YouTube as well. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.